So, let's talk Nintendo Switch 2, the powerhouse handheld that enables Nintendo to finally stand toe-to-toe with PlayStation and Xbox. If not in raw power, then at the very least in the library of current-gen games it can run. This is everything I could have ever wanted from a successor to Nintendo Switch and then some, a system that can play bigger and better games, as well as upgraded titles from the original Switch library. And with Nintendo showing no signs of slowing its output of high quality, exclusive releases, I can't see any reason not to invest in the Switch 2. So, unfortunately, I won't have much positive to say about Nintendo in this video. Full disclosure, I am still incredibly excited for the Switch 2 and most of the content announced for it. Even that fuck-ass Welcome Tour game that should have been free. It does look like a fun way to do a deep dive into the system's specs in spite of its paywall. I want to use this quick video as an opportunity to voice my grievances about this system, so that in the future, if and when I review Switch 2 games, I can delve into the contents of the game itself, without feeling the need to discuss external factors like pricing and corporate greed as a footnote. Nintendo's executives tend to act independently from their creative teams anyway, so I don't think this is an unfair assessment to make. That being said, I have no more nice things to say about Nintendo in this video, and starting now I'm gonna be brutally honest with you all. Just buy a PlayStation. Nintendo Switch has a treasure trove of exclusive games and impossibly polished ports that have made its $200, $300, even $350 price points an easy recommendation over the competition. After all, why pay half a grand for a liquid metal dispenser and $70 for games and controllers when you could be spending hundreds less on a Mario Kart 8 Deluxe bundle and start playing with a friend right out of the box? You get the same amount of joy and playtime on a family-friendly budget. The fact that the same company could then price its successor console high enough for Sony to easily one-up them with a substantially better deal, it's downright embarrassing. What's more, the same company that served as an escape from the microtransaction digital deluxe battle pass bullshit is now set to release some of the most expensive games to ever hit the market. And among this list of unaffordable Switch 2 titles is what I would consider to be one of the worst deals Nintendo has ever offered. A game so devoid of purpose and worthwhile content that its mere presence on a GameStop shelf would repulse me more than the wall of Funko Pops. And that game isn't Mario Kart, surprisingly enough. Mario Kart World is by far the Switch 2's most controversial title, highlighting the ridiculousness of how Nintendo values its own products. $80 for a Mario spin-off is going to create a very slippery slope for Nintendo and even other publishers to justify another price increase for AAA titles. Granted, you could argue that the open world aspect of the game, on top of all the fixins of a standard Mario Kart game, would give it more value and content than 8 Deluxe with its DLC, being a combined $85 for repurposed Wii U and mobile phone content. And it's that logic that leads me to say that despite believing no game is worth more than $70, Mario Kart World isn't the Switch 2's worst offender. Now, you may be thinking that I'm going to turn your attention to one of the Nintendo Switch 2 Edition games. And you're absolutely right. One of these 6 Switch games receiving a paid upgrade for Switch 2 is, in my opinion, a completely unnecessary inclusion in the new system's lineup. And let's just get it out of the way, no, the $10 paywall for an actually playable Pokemon experience is somehow not the worst deal out of this list. Take, for example, the Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom upgrades. Tears of the Kingdom was not worth $70 on Switch, so what on earth possessed Nintendo to think charging 33 cents per extra frame was a good deal? It's even worse that Breath of the Wild's upgrade breaks a generation-long tradition of Nintendo re-releases, including all previous DLC, making the entire Breath of the Wild experience easily break $100 after tax. And what bugs me about the latter example is Nintendo could have made more money by merging the Switch 2 Edition upgrade and the expansion pass into a single $20 bundle. Longtime fans would be rewarded for owning the DLC by receiving a free upgrade, and Zelda newcomers would see Breath of the Wild Switch 2 Edition plus Champion's Ballad on the shelves and be enticed by the prospect of a true definitive package. Because, let's be real, with the DLC not included in the entry price, there's next to no chance that someone who just got into Breath of the Wild will be willing to pay the extra $20 before putting loads of time into the base game. And at that point, would players who end up enjoying the game enough to reconsider buying the DLC even care enough to pick it up right away, or would they be burnt out and in need of a break? I really feel like Nintendo shot themselves in the foot here, because on Switch, owning at least one of these games was an absolute no-brainer. The price to content ratio is insanely justified, or shall I say, was justified, before it came out that the duology on Switch 2 would cost a combined $170 at MSRP. Now, to be fair, that price quickly drops if you have a Nintendo Switch Online membership. With a base tier subscription, the base games drop to $50 each, making the combined cost with the upgrade packs and DLC $140, but that quickly jumps back up to $160 after you factor in the price of a yearly subscription. The expansion pass seems to fare better, with the upgrade packs for each game being free perks, but then you add the increased subscription cost and yeah, you're right back where you started. However, I will concede that a good chunk of the cost would be mitigated if you happen to have friends or family who are willing to split the cost of a family plan, so not the worst deal out of the Switch 2 editions. Metroid Prime 4 is insanely optimized for Switch 2, and Kirby is perfect, no notes. Absolute video gamery. That leaves but one Nintendo Switch 2 edition to stand above the rest in terms of how completely unnecessary it is. Enter the Super Mario Party Jamboree Nintendo Switch 2 edition plus Jamboree TV game. Jesus Christ, get a room! So let me just clear something up. This is Jamboree, this is Jamboree TV, and this is Jamboree Switch 2 edition. That's how I'm going to refer to these, alright? Okay, back to the video. Literally no one is talking about how baffling the prospect of Jamboree Switch 2 edition is, or about Jamboree Switch 2 edition at all. For how long people have been begging Nintendo to develop DLC for Mario Party, it sure is quiet now that Nintendo's gone and done it. I suppose because Jamboree already had a sizable selection of boards, and the Switch 2 edition includes 0 new boards. That's like the one thing people asked for. It does include 20 new minigames, some of which are playable in the actual Mario Party mode, but the main draw of this upgrade, or at least what Nintendo is clearly pushing as the main draw, is the new Jamboree TV side game. Jamboree TV is a collection of new and reworked modes where you, the player, compete in the game show-esque setting while taking advantage of the Switch 2 exclusive features, such as the built-in mic and mouse controls and the camera accessory. $20 to whoever can point out the first issue. Sorry, that's incorrect. It's actually camera play without a space in the middle. Bowser Live is by far the biggest focus of Jamboree TV, making use of a full-body camera feed in Kinect-style minigames. This of course makes the USB-C camera a necessity for Jamboree TV. Throw in the price of the upgrade itself, and the introductory price for Switch 2's version of Mario Party more than doubles over the original Jamboree. Does Jamboree TV have more than double the amount of content of its base game? Well, let's take a closer look at what's actually on display here. Camera play comes in two forms. There's the aforementioned Bowser Live, where players use their bodies in lieu of a controller to complete minigames, and a retooled version of Mario Party, where your face is displayed next to your character during minigames and chance time events. And that's about it. Live reactions from players sitting right next to you, and the Fourth Horseman. Now, I'll be honest, one downside to local multiplayer is being unable to see each other's reactions while looking at the camera. But that small, optional interaction is all you really need to sell me on the camera. All Jamboree Switch 2 edition needed to be was a cheap upgrade with a handful of new minigames, optional camera play support, and a performance boost. And speaking of... Each of the Switch 2 edition games boasts enhanced visuals and frame rate that are only possible on the upgraded hardware. But what exactly does that mean for Super Mario Party Jamboree? Well, nothing, I think, at least for the base game. Jamboree and Jamboree TV are treated as two separate games from which you select at the title screen. Think Super Mario 3D World and Bowser's Fury, or Sonic Generations and Shadow Generations. According to Nintendo, Jamboree TV renders at up to 1440p when docked, and that only applies to Jamboree TV. Every source I could find on the matter confirms the same. The original Super Mario Party Jamboree will be locked at 1080p despite the hardware clearly being capable of better performance. Granted, we may see Jamboree in handheld mode jump from 720p to 1080p in handheld mode, but that is iffy at best. The original website for Switch 2 Edition games clearly reads Jamboree TV only next to the part that discusses handheld mode, so best case scenario is docked mode is arbitrarily locked to 1080p, and worst case, the base game gets 0 enhancements. But wait, a hypothetical viewer may be asking at this moment, wouldn't the camera play features and new minigames count as enhancements to the base Mario Party mode? And you're absolutely right, it would be valid to refer to these new features as enhancements if they applied to the main game. You see, I noticed a little blurb on the Jamboree Switch 2 Edition website. According to Nintendo, 78 previously included minigames will receive greater detail. This vexed me. Was Nintendo flat out telling us they couldn't bother improving every minigame? What would greater detail even entail given we've been told there's no resolution bump in Jamboree? Well, after doing some more digging, I found that right here in this treehouse footage is the primary Mario Party mode sitting right there on the Jamboree TV select screen. What this means is that the base game features a Mario Party mode with no improvements, and the Jamboree TV expansion has its own Mario Party mode specifically for these Switch 2 features. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the entire premise and appeal of a Nintendo Switch 2 Edition game the fact that it improves the original Nintendo Switch game? It doesn't count if you take a chunk of the main game and port it to DLC world, especially because Jamboree has over half a dozen modes that will be seeing no improvement whatsoever. This also provides some much needed context for the number of minigames Nintendo is bringing greater detail to. Because these base game modes have essentially been scrapped in Jamboree TV, the respective minigames aren't being ported over. Jamboree Nintendo Switch 2 Edition features 132 minigames, which seems like a massive selection on paper, but because of the way Jamboree and Jamboree TV are segregated, we're technically seeing a decrease in minigame count. Over 110 playable minigames in Jamboree has become less than 100 in Jamboree TV. When I mentioned this over on Blue Sky, this replier put it best. Nintendo is essentially selling you a $20 Mario Party game, built entirely on reused assets, that requires owning another $60 Mario Party game and a $55 camera accessory. This could have easily been a cheap eShop game or, God forbid, a pack-in title for the Nintendo Switch 2 camera that would have excused the asset reuse while allowing Jamboree TV to stand on its own, no Jamboree dependency necessary. But the decision to sell Jamboree TV as an $80 Mario Party game at retail stores hurts not only the people who will buy it, but those who don't. GameShare is a new feature for Nintendo Switch 2, which is essentially the evolution of Download Play. It allows 4 systems to play together with just one copy of the game. This feature comes in 2 forms: GameShare, which is initiated from the home screen and allows for local multiplayer, and GameShare via GameChat, which is initiated with a paid Nintendo Switch Online account and allows for online multiplayer. Jamboree Switch 2 Edition only supports the former feature. That means online play with friends is still going to require 4 copies of the game and at least 1 Switch Online subscription. As far as I can tell, Jamboree TV doesn't have any online functionality of its own, so at the very least you won't be spending $80 each. Now, about GameShare, both Switch and Switch 2 consoles can receive an invitation for GameShare, but only a Nintendo Switch 2 can send an invitation. This means a local multiplayer game of Jamboree would require the host to buy a $450 console and an $80 game. And yes, the upgrade pack is required in this scenario, as Nintendo Switch games can only support GameShare if they receive a patch to do so. We already know of 12 Switch games that will be receiving free updates for Nintendo Switch 2, many of which support local multiplayer and will very likely be receiving GameShare support for free. However, by virtue of Super Mario Party Jamboree having a Switch 2 edition, that functionality will almost certainly be locked behind the upgrade pack paywall. But maybe $20 isn't a bad price to share the biggest Mario Party to date with your friends. Oh, thank God, I thought Nintendo was being consumer friendly for once. So, there's only one board available, you can't play with Pro Rules, and you're limited to 30 minigames? At that point, what benefit is there to using GameShare over just playing in tabletop mode? I thought that maybe the Switch 2 would struggle streaming too much game data to 3 other systems at once, or perhaps the other systems need to download a certain amount of data before the game can start, and there's a hard limit to make sure the original Switch models can handle everything smoothly. But then you look at what Hazelight Studios did for Split Fiction and its GameShare functionality. The entire game can run on another Switch 2 or Switch model, despite only releasing on Switch 2, entirely through GameShare. So how the hell could Jamboree Switch 2 Edition be unable to handle the entire selection of boards, every minigame, the goddamn Pro Rules? In all honesty, the mere inclusion of GameShare in Jamboree Switch 2 Edition is nothing short but a slap in the face. $20 US for a locked-down, sanitized, gate-kept experience that is infinitely worse than simply sharing one screen. Frankly, the Nintendo that came off of the massive flop that was the Wii U wouldn't have offered its fans such a low-value, high-cost product. They wouldn't have charged a premium to tell you what your console can do. They would have created something new and fresh. Something to show you what the next generation is capable of. They would have given you everything you could have possibly needed to understand and fall in love with your new system, without expecting anything in return. In that timeline, where Nintendo knew the worth of its customers and valued them, we'd be getting a game like Mousework in July. If not directly from Nintendo, then they would have supported and published the dev's work, knowing that a game like this would represent the company's core values of wholesome, innovative fun. Instead, we have Super Mario Party Jamboree Nintendo Switch 2 Edition, an $80 tutorial for a $55 web camera, an expansion that taints the original game's reputation as the biggest and best Mario Party by relation. The game that you'll never know was Nintendo Switch 2's most egregious title. Because, like, why would you buy this?